Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and we are being joined by an incredible guest today that everything that I found about this guy, it is so clear to me how much he values working on and focusing on our strengths and being of service to others in stepping into our best leadership potential and doing it all together in a collaborative environment to give back to everybody around us. So I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest and fellow entrepreneur. His name is Mike Vincent. As a retired Marine officer in St. Charles, Missouri local, Mike has led Marines around the world, but nowhere feels more like home than where his journey began. From his teenage years at Francis Howell High to learning the HVAC trade under his now father-in-law and then studying history at the University of Missouri, September 11th, for so many of us, I'm just old enough to remember September 11th, set his life on a slightly different course. After 20 years of military service, he returned to St. Charles to help carry on the family HVAC business and invest in the community that helped shape him with his brother as a strengths coach with Kaleo Coaching. Leadership, service, and hard work have always guided Mike, and now he wants to give back to the community that set him up for success. And him and I thanked him for his service off the air, and I love his response to it. I'm going to out it right here publicly on the air. As he said, I'm still serving, just under a different capacity. And that's the beauty of entrepreneurship. And I think it's the perfect segue. I'm excited about this one. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Mike Vincent. All right, Mike, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Brian. I'm thrilled that you'd have me on. Thank you.
We are thrilled that you're here, Mike, especially because I want to hear your backstory from you personally. Forget your bio. That teases just the tip of the iceberg for you. Take us beyond it. Who's Mike? How did you start doing all these cool things?
Well, it's funny because it really is kind of a theme that runs through what my brother and I are now doing with Kaleo Coaching. And that is really letting your circumstances speak to you in a way that you are open to receive and open to jump on those opportunities where you can serve and do what you're able to do. For me, my family moved from Oklahoma to Missouri. We started going to a little church down the road. I saw a girl that I thought looked pretty cute, and I started talking to her. And then her dad came up to me and said, "Hey, are you sniffing around my daughter? You want a job this summer?" And that turned into an apprenticeship to learn the heating and air conditioning trade. And I was on track to be an HVAC guy. Went to college. September 11th happened, as you said, and ended up doing 20 years in the Marine Corps. I didn't set out to do that, but as the world kind of changed around me and a lot of people I knew and a lot of young people were joining up in order to participate in what was happening in those initial months and years after September 11th, I felt like I could go help in some way. And so that's what I did, not knowing it would turn into a whole career. And even as I got to about the 20-year mark of serving Marines, my father-in-law, who had been my boss all those years before, learning heating and air conditioning, asked me if I'd be willing to help keep this heating and cooling company in the family. And so when I retired from the Marine Corps, I returned to St. Charles, Missouri in order to help my family keep this heating and cooling company going as it's handed off from one generation to the next. In the meantime, my brother had been working for Edward Jones and in the capacity as a coach within Edward Jones, was learning a lot about things like onboarding and quality feedback that builds teams. And an organization like Edward Jones was embracing this strengths-based, positive way of leadership. Well, that's what I was doing in the Marine Corps too. The Marine Corps obviously places a high degree of value on counseling, coaching, and giving quality feedback to the Marines in your charge. And so as I circled back to keep the heating and cooling company in the family and keep it running, which is kind of my day job now, My brother, whose day job is still with Edward Jones in a coaching capacity, we realized, man, we're learning a lot about building teams and what's working both in the corporate world and what I observed worked really well in a military capacity. Now applying that to a small family-owned business, a heating and cooling company. And that really caused the two of us to say, we're learning way too much good stuff here to not share it with our community. And so we've had many opportunities where people say to us, would you come and give a workshop to my team? Or individuals that say, hey, I'd like to know more about this. What do you mean by strengths-based leadership? And what does it mean to lead with strengths? Why are organizations like Gallup and Edward Jones constantly touting the benefits of this as it relates to engagement and retention and all these good things we all want for our companies? And so my brother and I kind of just felt like, man, we're kind of being called to answer these questions and answer these requests for help in our community. So let's do it. Let's do this. And that's really what Kaleo Coaching exists to do, is to respond to those that would like to see what's been working so well, both in organizations like Edward Jones, in organizations that I observed during my career in the Marine Corps. And that's turned into a company based out of St. Charles, Missouri called Kaleo Coaching. And we're seeing a lot of growth and a lot of interest in how people can apply this both as individuals, but also for their teams in a corporate, small business, nonprofit, church ministry, many different contexts that it applies.
Yeah, I love that overview for so many different reasons, Mike. There are probably 10 different threads simultaneously that I want to go into, but unfortunately, as humans and with natural speech, we can only do one at a time. So I'm just going to piggyback off of a point that you raised, which is a lot of people aren't familiar with strengths-based leadership. We hear so many different facets of leadership, so many different philosophies, so many different academic approaches, like servant leadership. Talk to us about that strengths-based leadership. And I know so frequently you call out Gallup's approach with the CliftonStrengths assessment. Talk to us about how all that factors into the work that you do.
Mm-hmm. CliftonStrengths is our favorite tool to use in a coaching capacity. My brother Dan, who unfortunately couldn't join us today, he's certified through the International Coaching Federation, and he's also a Gallup strengths coach. And then I got certified through Gallup to be a strengths coach as well, because what we've realized, in my time in the Marine Corps, and my brother would echo this, is that our circumstances, the actual tasks associated with our jobs, don't really provide clarity on what we're being called to do on a daily basis in our families and our communities. Circumstances are so fluid. Circumstances change so often and so readily. The tasks that we're asked to do at work, particularly in an entrepreneurial type role, those tasks are all over the map. And what we found is that our teams relied heavily on particularly the leaders, managers, but also individuals within the team to find something positive that can be a guiding force towards clarity in the work that you're called to do. And that is fundamentally, in our opinion, and in Gallup's opinion, that's fundamentally a internal call it a personality-based thing that you can look for and find. Instead of finding it in that task at work, instead find it in here, find that internal clarity, that driving force, that thing that motivates you most, the thing that you never grow tired of doing. These are usually what have been called soft skills in the past. I read an article on Forbes last year that said soft skills are now being transitioned into durable skills. And what we have found, and I'm sure what you and many of your listeners would agree, is that the real recipe for success in these fluid contexts, in the entrepreneurial world, nonprofit, a small business, it's so fluid that stability comes from your ability to look inside and say, this is what's going to guide my approach on whatever task I'm asked to do. I want to lead with that thing that motivates me. I want to lead with that lens or that approach to my work in a way that fuels me with energy based off how I'm designed. And that's what CliftonStrengths does. It's an assessment that an individual can take, teams can take, and it reveals 34 different strengths themes that are the result of Gallup's research, 30 plus years of research in collecting themes that are directly related to success that people have. And as you can imagine, these themes sound an awful lot like durable skills, or as many of us maybe know them, soft skills. Things like communication, things like adaptability, things like analytical. These types of things we know are kind of the recipe of success that run through all of our successes, regardless of what the task is. Do I have the ability to commit to something and stick with it? Do I have the ability to adapt when circumstances change? When we're equipped with those top strengths that reveal how we are wired, this gives us a guide, a lens that we can look at our work through. And it helps me, I'll just speak for myself, it helps me approach all of the tasks that are before me in the work that I do on a daily basis, whether it's heating and air conditioning or whether it's what I did for many years in the Marine Corps, so that I approach that thing in a way that resonates with me and fuels me and energizes me to do the good work that I'm called to do. Calling is what Kaleo means. Kaleo Coaching, from the Greek word kaleo, which means calling. And we use those strengths as a guide to clarity that says your circumstances are going to form a pattern of what your calling is. For me, that was wrapping up a Marine Corps career and being asked to come back to my hometown and keep a heating and cooling company in the family. Those circumstances are unique circumstances, right? They're unique to me and my dynamic of family and community and connections. And it's my responsibility to respond to that calling. I might not be the best heating and air conditioning guy. I know enough to be dangerous, but the bigger pattern is a calling that I want to be responsive to. And it aligned very well with what my top CliftonStrengths are. For me, it's adaptability, being able to pivot and frequently change. The military career was perfect for me because I got to move every 3 years. It provided a frequent ability to adapt to new circumstances and have to learn something new. Learner is in my top 5. Maximizer is in my top 5, which Gallup defines maximizer as the ability to take something and improve upon it, as opposed to creating something brand new. So as you can imagine, for me, the opportunity to come alongside an existing small business, a heating and air conditioning company, or a coaching business, Kaleo Coaching with my brother, and come in and bring my abilities to improve upon that really, really resonates with how I'm wired. Whereas somebody else who might be high in activator or some of the other Gallup strengths, they might be fueled by the challenge of creating something brand new, that blank canvas. Well, that doesn't really line up with me as much. So the circumstances, as they spoke to me, I recognized the pattern because I knew my own strengths. I had taken the assessment, and that provides a tool to create clarity that can help you recognize what you're being called to do.
Yeah, Mike, the more that you articulate these things, really where my head goes, and you went to it right at the end there, is talking about that self-awareness. It just seems to me like so much underlying under the work that you do, and really the foundation of the work that you do, it requires a level of self-awareness. And what really stands out to me, it pops up so much in your line of work, is you frequently, even today in our conversation, you talk about what we're called to do. And I find as a podcaster, the feedback that I always get from people, whether they're guests or listeners or just people who know me personally, is they're like, Brian, it seems like you really enjoy this. And truth be told, Mike, the reason why I recognize this is the right path for me is because it gives me energy. The more interviews I do, the more I podcast, the more I interact with listeners, it gives me energy. And to me, that's a signal of, oh, hey, this is probably something I should be into. But what I find is to pick on that verbiage of what you're being called to do, Mike, I would argue that we can only step into that if we're listening. Because if the proverbial phone is on do not disturb and we're just ignoring the incoming calls that we're getting from the universe, from a higher power, from our own inner selves, if we don't listen to those things, then we'll never be able to step into those. Talk to us about that important step that we can take and what that step actually looks like, because you heard the calling. When September 11th happened, you weren't merely an observer. You felt something inside of you and you listened to it and you took action from it. How does that all play into our ability to start doing this work?
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. And I guess the question for many of us would be, what's preventing me from listening? If I'm missing something in my environment right now, the community that I'm choosing to serve in, and I'm being called to do something in that community, why am I not hearing it? And I would argue, Brian, that oftentimes it might be because of preferences that we have. We might get a little caught up in our own preferences, and that might be something along the lines of, I was studying history at University of Missouri when I joined the Marine Corps. My preference at that time was to stay in academia and be a historian. I still love doing amateur historian work. That was a preference that I have. Sometimes those preferences, I think, can end up being so consuming that it can cause us to maybe miss something that's happening in our environment. We tend to go a little internal sometimes, too much, so much so that we don't see or notice those circumstances. In the same way as I was hitting the 20-year mark in the Marine Corps, it was a decision. Should I keep going? Should I stay in? This might be a good time to stay in and keep progressing, keep getting promoted. But my circumstances spoke to me. I had people in my community and my family saying, would you be interested in helping us do this thing back in your hometown? Whenever you retire, no rush, but when you retire from the Marine Corps, would you be willing to come help us over here? Those are clear signals. Unique circumstances and unique opportunities that I felt like for me, it would have been easy for me to shut that out and say, that doesn't really align with my preferences. My preferences might be a little too much fixated on pay, right? Might be too fixated on other factors that might get the best of us. CliftonStrengths has a really interesting relationship with another personality assessment called the Big Five framework. And a lot of your listeners might be familiar with that one. It has 5 personality types, the Big Five. CliftonStrengths has 4 domains. There are 34 strengths themes, and they all fit into 4 domains. So you've got the 4 CliftonStrengths domains and the 5 Big Five personality types. You won't be surprised to learn that the 4 CliftonStrengths domains line up really, really well with 4 out of the 5 Big Five framework of personality types. They're things you've heard of before: extroversion and execution and relationship building. These types of large domains that we know. Some people are just really good at relationship building, and some people are really extroverts and things like that. There is one personality type in the Big Five framework that does not correlate with CliftonStrengths 4 domains. And that personality type is called neuroticism. This, in my opinion, is a really interesting clue, because the Big Five framework would say that some of us, I would argue all of us at times, can have that chronically negative or overly anxious approach to things, where it's a little bit more fear-based, a little bit more shame-based, a little bit more anxiety associated with decision-making. That can tend to be a personality type for all of us. I really like how CliftonStrengths basically says, we're not going there. There is a degree of negativity that we all fight against and battle against. But when you focus on these 34 strengths, you are by definition focusing on 4 domains that, according to the science, does not correlate with neuroticism. It puts us in a positive mental framework that says, this is what I'm leading with. This is what I'm focusing on. And I'm not going to let some of that negative approach or that anxious or control-based approach, which we're all susceptible to do, I'm not going to let that control my decision making. I'm not going to let that control my approach. So I think that's another really, really big clue about what sometimes can cause us to miss those clues in our communities, in our families, that are actually clues to our calling. By entering into a way of thinking and an approach that by definition is productive and by definition leads to vitality and growth, we don't entertain those things that cause us to go inward, isolate maybe a little bit more than what we normally would do, get caught up a little bit more in our own preferences than maybe what we should, and instead remain open to what our community might be calling us to do. That might be as simple as grabbing a broom and being the one that's sweeping out that garage every day, or it might be as complex as commanding a battalion of Marines or something like that. In either circumstances, we don't want to be the type of people that are so closed off we miss those clues. Instead, we want to crack open that potential within us. And CliftonStrengths is a tool that has been scientifically shown to correlate very well with all of those things that cause us to be open to the clues in our communities that lead to vitality, growth, productivity, retention, and all the things that we know we want in our own vocations and we want on our teams.
Yeah, Mike, I love hearing you talk about this. It's fun for me as the host of this show because sometimes I get to play devil's advocate in these interviews. And I'm going to pose you. Yeah, I feel like this is a bit more of a philosophical question. I feel like you and I are very much aligned in our mindset here, but let's face it, our job here is not to talk to each other and preach to the choir, but it's to talk to the listeners. And being an entrepreneur, it evokes so many inner personal challenges. And for me personally, it's been the thing that has led to more personal development than any other experience in my life. And it challenges us in so many ways. And what I find is that when it comes to labels, whether it's, taking the CliftonStrengths assessment and figuring out what our top 5 traits are, I'm a big fan of Myers-Briggs. Like, I'm an ENTP. That's my personality type. And for me, it helps to, you use the word clues. I'm actually going to leverage that. I really like the way you phrase that. Those are some clues as to why and how I operate. For me, it's not a label or a box that I fit myself into. However, I talk to entrepreneurs for a living, and I see so frequently how labels can confine them into boxes. I'll call out, for example, I've worked with entrepreneurs in the past. I feel like we're all a little bit ADHD. Just listen to the sequence of my questions. But I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs in the past who have said, oh, I can't do that. I have ADHD. And I'm just like, well, that could be your superpower. That could be a label that you use as a strength. Or you're right, it could fit into the narrative of why you can't do something. That's why I find that labels are so interesting in how we leverage them. I can even pick on zodiac signs. I'm a typical Libra in so many ways. I don't let that limit me, Mike.
Me too.
There you go. That's why we're so aligned on all of these things.
That's right.
Talk to us about labels, because I'm sure you've seen it even more than I have, how much this can unlock performance or people's own inner narratives can put them into those boxes.
I totally agree with you. And, one of the things that is emphasized heavily in the CliftonStrengths certification course to become a coach is that understanding that these are not labels. And this is where I found a really exciting connection with how we teach Marines about warfighting in the Marine Corps. And there's a really, I think, a compelling metaphor here that with Marines and Marine units, we want to make sure that their decision-making process is guided through a process of orientation, and then which leads to decision and action. And one of the magical things that happens when we orient on a particular task or we orient on a particular problem is that this is a process that typically involves analysis, understanding exactly what's being asked of me, and then synthesis forming an approach that is unique to you, that satisfies the unique problem that you're being asked to solve. That analysis and that synthesis is what we call orientation in the Marine Corps. And it requires a variety of approaches oftentimes. The problem is unique, and it will require a unique approach. And one of the things that particularly young people don't have is a body of experience to draw on. They don't have all of those stories in the back of their mind and those experiences necessarily that they can draw on to make a good decision. We encourage young Marines to be voracious readers, because the more of a reader you are, the more patterns you have in your own mind that you can sift through in order to develop a unique approach to something. Podcasts like this are a diverse portfolio of stories that people can listen to and vicariously make their own, so that they have a variety of approaches that they can almost flip through rapidly and then say, here's one that works. And so instead of thinking of these things as labels that limit us, we can think of CliftonStrengths, or even the other personality assessments as well, as opportunities to sift through different approaches based off of what the circumstances require. This is where the circumstances aren't dictating what we do. The circumstances are all opportunities. And we have within us a variety of approaches that we can take that can either elicit a better outcome or maybe a worse outcome. And that might be a bit of trial and error. But as we rapidly sift through those approaches, we've got something that might work best. And as we become better decision makers through experience, through reading, through watching a good podcast like this, or listening to a podcast like this one, we develop that vicarious experience that we can use. I would argue that the 34 CliftonStrengths are approaches that one can rapidly sift through based off of the circumstances. And trial and error might be required early on, but the more you get to know your unique approach based off how you're wired, the thing that you do effortlessly, the thing that you never grow tired of doing, that particular approach you're going to find is going to lead you to the most amount of success, I believe, in your vocation. But it starts with knowing it. And when you know it, it's not a label that limits you. Instead, it's an opportunity to to sift through this variety of approaches and take decisive action when it comes to those problems that we're confronted with, particularly, as you said, as entrepreneurs.
Boom. I love that. Mike, gosh, we could do this all day long. It's such a shame that we're limited by time here today. I've got about 500 other thought threads that I want to explore with you, but I love the way that you phrase these things, because even pointing out reading, and that's so great to hear how young Marines are encouraged to read. For me, it's quotes. Ever since I was a young kid, I've become obsessed with quotes, because famous quotes are spoken by very wise minds. And I've always thought, why would I limit my perception of the world, my way of navigating through challenges, through just my own experiences? That's such a limited lens of the world. I love learning from others, and this is exactly, you just right there defined our motto and our approach for this podcast. Is we want to broaden all of our thinkings as fellow entrepreneurs, because we're all in this together. That's why we always say a rising tide lifts all boats. It's our founding principle here. So Mike, this is so much fun. We're definitely gonna have to do it again soon, but I'm really excited to hear how you answer this last question before we drop your links, because of course, listeners, this can be the beginning of your journey into all the great work that Mike and his brother are doing. Remember, you're only getting half of this tag team duo in today's episode. So we're going to drop those links in just a minute. But before we get there, Mike, I always love asking a broad question, which is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own personal and professional growth journeys, what's that one piece of advice you want to leave them with?
Well, it might be two things. The one thing that I found myself saying to Marines all the time, and I continue to give this advice today, is that resilience, which has been a buzzword in society, in the military, for many years now, resilience is not just this idea that you're able to bounce back as if nothing happened. Instead, I would argue, and I would advise, think about resilience as your ability to adapt, And if your listeners are fans of the Rocky movies, you'll know Rocky Balboa, the boxer, is seen as this icon of resilience in American culture, right? Because he stands toe to toe with Apollo in Rocky 1 and in Rocky 2. And he stands toe to toe with Mr. T in Rocky 3. And he stands toe to toe with Drago in Rocky 4, et cetera, et cetera. But Rocky 3 is different. Rocky 3, he loses, and he goes through the most adversity that he's ever gone through. His manager dies, and things are not going well for him. This is when resilience is most difficult. And Rocky demonstrated with his friend, Apollo, who came alongside of him and said, let me teach you a new way of fighting, because the way you're fighting right now is not going to work. And so we need to change it up. We need a variety of approaches here, and I'm going to give you a new approach. And his friend, former rival, teaches him a new style of fighting, and Rocky comes back and wins the championship. To me, that's such a great picture there of what resilience really is. It's the ability to adapt. It's the ability to change. But in particular, we don't do it by ourselves. And CliftonStrengths, just like so many other things as entrepreneurs, is we realize when we can collaborate, when we can work as teams, it becomes exponentially more powerful. These strengths are not labels, but they are the natural ways that we operate and tend to operate. And it's a good thing when you know it. It's an even better thing when you can know how your teammates are designed, because now you've got a thoughtful way to collaborate with one another. One final metaphor you've heard before is the blind man and the elephant. And one blind man is feeling the trunk of the elephant and describing it one way. And another blind man is feeling the tail of the elephant and describing it differently, while one is on the side of the elephant or on the leg and describing it a different way. All of them are correct, but none of them have a complete picture. And that really captures, in my mind, the power of leading with your strengths, knowing your strengths, but especially collaborating with others and knowing theirs in order to produce a better decision and produce the type of adaptability and resilience we know that we need as individuals, and our teams and organizations need too. And I would say CliftonStrengths is a great starting point in order to start that conversation and begin that process of empowering everybody to lead with their strengths and collaborate in ways they never maybe had thought about doing before.
Whoa, Mike, giving me chills here in real time during this episode. When you talk about Rocky 4, full transparency, it's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Me too.
Yeah, and it really strikes me. It's something that I don't think stood out to me before is you and I love the Rocky series, but actually if you think about it, the victory, think about Rocky 4 in particular, the victory is maybe 10 minutes at the end of the movie. The entirety of Rocky 4 is him doing the hardest things ever. Such hard training in the middle of the Arctic and being challenged, being tested, and still showing up. And Mike, you have absolutely delivered in so many ways. You talked, we kicked this conversation off about you being in service of others, whether it's your storytelling, whether it's your own personal experiences that you share. You've so delivered on that value, and I'm very excited for listeners to check out your work and go even deeper into the wonderful world of all the ways that you're using CliftonStrengths assessments and all the other work that you're doing. So drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Yeah, the main thing I would encourage listeners to do is go to our website, KaleoCoaching.com. That's KALEO coaching.com. And on our website, you can see the services that we're offering. You can purchase codes to start your strengths assessment right now, today, straight off of our website. And that would be a great launch pad. My brother and I are also active on LinkedIn and Facebook. You can find us at Kaleo Coaching on both of those social media sites as well.
And on top of that, listeners, you already know that we're making it as easy as possible for you to find those links down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. We're linking straight to KaleoCoaching.com, so you can click right on through. Don't worry about spelling. Don't worry about remembering it if you're on the go. Click right on through. We're also linking to Mike's personal LinkedIn, so if you want to reach out, continue the conversation, talk about your business, your team. Gosh, you've seen that Mike is very much one of us as a fellow entrepreneur. So, Mike, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Brian, it was an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.